You're listening to the Journey podcast. What does anxiety have in common with hypnosis? Stay tuned for the first part of the Hypnotica series. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer. What if everything we've been told about holistic health, healing, and well-being is only part of the story? Because thriving in today's world looks different than it used to. Here, we challenge the narratives, rethink what it means to become human, and explore how that shapes the way we lead, live, and step into our full potential. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to our special Hypnotica series. In this first part of the series, we focus on the biggest myths and misconceptions that keep people from exploring hypnosis. We discuss how hypnotherapy works and the science behind accessing the subconscious mind for healing. Craig Meriwether is a certified clinical hypnotherapist, medical hypnosis specialist, neuro-linguistic programming specialist, and founder of Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy, helping people eliminate the negative emotions and limiting beliefs that may be keeping them from reaching their full potential. For over 12 years, Craig has been helping people heal from early childhood trauma, helping cancer patients with pain control, veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, students with test anxiety, children with nightmares, entrepreneurs with confidence, athletes with peak performance, and anyone who may be dealing with overwhelm, fear, and anxiety. Here's the first part of this fascinating series, The Myths of Hypnosis with Craig Meriwether. Hello and welcome everybody to today's special series. We are going to be kicking off Hypnotica, which is a series all about hypnosis, past life regression, and all the fun things that come with that. And of course, joining me today is our guest, Craig Meriwether. And we are going to be starting us off with the myths of hypnosis in part one of Hypnotica. Welcome, Craig. And I'm very excited to dive into all this.
Yeah. Thank you for having me back again. And I'm really looking forward to this. We're going to have a lot of time to really dive in deep to aspects of the subconscious mind and superconscious level mind, that accessing higher self. And as the series goes on, if people have questions, please, put them in the comment section or maybe even email one of us. And I'm happy to answer questions on the episodes or just through the comments sections of wherever you find this, whether Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or the podcast site. Yeah, I guess just let's dive into subconscious mind and healing and hypnosis. I appreciate you inviting me to do this because even though I think the last episode we did together was pretty close to an hour-ish or so, something around there, there's so much to talk about this because there's so much baggage to the word hypnosis and therefore hypnotherapy, what people see on TV and movies and comedy shows, whether here in America's Las Vegas or wherever somebody sees a hypnotist show where people are doing crazy things up on the stage. And so there's this misnomer, probably the biggest myth is the loss of control. And that's really unfortunate because I think it keeps a lot of people from wanting to investigate, let alone try this methodology. In my experience and talking to other hypnotherapists, conferences and things, their experience is also that we're the bottom of the list in terms of people seeking help if they're dealing with trauma or from early childhood or last month, whether they're dealing with the hurt and pain of life or losing someone or just wanting confidence in whatever career, work, maybe giving a presentation at the big conference. These are all aspects of mindset, of beliefs that may be true, may be untrue. And a lot of people will find, because of the hurt and the pain they're experiencing, they'll look for ways of relief, of resolving these issues that may be causing anger or resentment or regret or frustration or disappointment, hopelessness. And they'll do the talk therapy, maybe even years of talk therapy, and maybe EDMR, the eye movement desensitization process, or cognitive behavioral therapy, or depth psychology, or these other modes of life coaching even. And they may still find themselves hurting and in pain because they're not accessing the part of mind where this hurt and pain is held. The conscious mind is great at analyzing and being analytical about a certain situation, using that logical part of mind, the conscious mind, to look at a situation. But if you're not quite sure what the situation is, you may find yourself spinning your wheels. And what's fascinating about using the techniques of hypnotherapy, and that's more of a umbrella term of there's not just like one technique of hypnotherapy. It's again like massage, where there's all sorts of different techniques of massage. And I live here in Flagstaff, Arizona, here in America, and we're at a high level. We're at 7,000 feet. And so the oxygen's less, and the athletes, professional athletes, like to come here and train because there's something about less oxygen, something about producing more white blood cells. So then when you go to sea level to do your events, you're stronger, faster, something. I don't know. Something like that. All you athletes are probably rolling your eyes, but something like that. And in Colorado Springs, which is nearby, about 12-hour drive north of here in Colorado, about the same altitude, they have the U.S. Olympic Training Center. And teams from around the world go to visit and train there. But if they're full, they come to Flagstaff. So we're at kind of like the secondary or third stage market for training. And somebody training for the Olympics, a long distance runner, wanting to get a massage may be different than maybe a mom or a grandmother in her 50s or 60s who sits at a desk all day long at work and then has 3 kids and 5 grandchildren. And she's going to want a different kind of massage than the long distance runner is going to want a massage. Still massage, but there's different techniques. So same with therapeutic hypnosis. And what's fascinating about these techniques is that they help you gain control. It's the exact opposite of what in the movies. There is no like the spy movies, Jason Bourne or whatever. You can't hypnotize somebody to go assassinate the prime minister or something. That's not a thing. No matter the MK Ultra conspiracy theories and things that you read about. It wasn't that they're taking out a pocket watch and putting somebody in some sort of trancy state and then they manipulated them and turned them into a zombie. That's not a thing. That's fun for movies and books and TV shows. That's not reality. It's not how it works. You can't make anybody do anything they don't want to do. And that's why there's some people say, well, I can't be hypnotized. In and of itself, hypnosis is a brainwave state. The biology of it is literally how fast your brain is operating. And you move in and out of the different brainwave states multiple times a day. And the most famous ones we learned about back in school, we'll focus on these just for this podcast episode, are beta, alpha, theta, and delta. And beta is that consciousness. We're in this conscious moment. We're aware of our surroundings in this present moment. Meditations, Zen meditation, transcendental meditation, TM. The whole point is to bring yourself back to this present moment with this breath, with this mantra, and be present here and now. Because our minds like to drift off and float off. And when that happens, literally what's happening is that your brain slows down. And so if you've ever seen those videos, maybe on YouTube or somewhere, with the electrical storm in the brain when somebody waves their hands around when they talk, or they're riding a bicycle, or thinking a thought, or feeling an emotion. So this electrical storm goes off in the brain because there's the electrical pulses go to each of the different brain cells required to walk down the street or to think a thought or feel the emotion. How fast that electrical storm happens determines what brainwave state you're in. Now, I know it takes about 10 years to get a PhD in neuroscience and become a brain surgeon or whatever. So I'm compacting all this into about 2 minutes. I'm missing some stuff. But just in terms of the overall general aspect of the brain operating, we're firing about 18 to 20 cycles per second. We're in the beta brainwave state in consciousness. But when you drift off, you're at work, maybe you're at school, maybe you remember back as a teenager, there was a class you didn't like algebra, and your mind would just drift off and you'd stare out the window and think about the weekends coming up and how much fun you're going to have with your friends. You're not in the present moment anymore. You moved into a daydreamy state. Even with the lights on and the kids around the classroom and the teacher still talking, you've pulled yourself out of the present moment and you've altered your state of consciousness to move into the future. Maybe you're thinking about the past, a trip you took, a vacation, or the person you're dating or something. You've slowed down how fast your brain is operating. You've moved into the alpha brainwave state. Now you're firing about 12 cycles per second. Let's say I'm back I'm 16 and I'm taking a math class, algebra, and I start falling asleep. And I'm not really awake, but I'm not really asleep either. I'm moving into the theta brainwave state, altering my consciousness once again, firing about 6 cycles per second. If I actually fall asleep, get into the REM sleep where my eyes are darting around underneath my eyelids, I'm firing about 1/2 cycle per second. Well, let's say the teacher sees me falling asleep and said, "Hey, Craig, why don't you come up here and do the problem on the board?" And I jolt away and I'm looking around and I'm embarrassed and humiliated because everybody's staring at me now. And I don't know how to do the problem on the board. I wasn't paying attention. And so now I'm super stressed. Now I'm firing about 30 cycles per second because I'm in the stress response. So just in that, whatever, 8, 9 minutes, I've altered my state of consciousness 3 or 4 times just by being in high school math class. We do that multiple times a day. So this isn't an aspect of you can or cannot. It's choose or choose not. That's a phrase. I guess I just made that up. But you can choose not to be in a hypnosis state. Maybe you don't feel comfortable. A lot of the academics like to say 20% are really susceptible to hypnosis. The majority of us just can be hypnotized, and there's 10, 20% who cannot be. I don't believe that at all. I believe you can, because you can always move into that alpha and theta brainwave state. You do it multiple times a day, at least twice a day when you're falling asleep and waking up. And so really what it is about the comfort level you are maybe in that research office with a bathing cap on with electrodes all over and this gruff person telling you to relax. It's like you don't feel comfortable maybe, or maybe that's out of your element. And you're like, oh, no one's going to tell me what to do, gaining control. And so you don't go into hypnosis. And so the academics say, oh, you can't then. No, you just didn't want to. But you find yourself in a more relaxed situation, maybe even through your own home, because a lot of this work we nowadays do through Zoom, unlike what we're doing right now. And that's because of the whole COVID situation, not just hypnotherapy, but talk therapy and life coaching or relationship counseling or doctor's appointments. A lot of it's done on Zoom now because people feel calm and comfortable in their homes. In fact, research shows that Zoom sessions, online sessions, virtual sessions work as well as in person. In fact, there's even some research that shows that Zoom sessions work better than in person. And so the state of altering your consciousness, you're able to do if you've ever, again, at work, you're a meeting at work. It doesn't apply to you. It doesn't have anything to do with your department or project you're on or whatever, until your mind drifts off and wanders off. You're at home during the weekend and you start thinking, oh, Monday, I got to give that presentation at the big meeting. And your mind wanders off during the TV show you're watching. Your networking event, somebody's going on and on about something, and your mind drifts off. You're driving home. If you've ever had this experience, you're driving home or maybe you're walking home and you start thinking about, oh, that presentation at work I got to give, or the homework that's due, or I got family coming over next week for dinner and I got to get the house together. And all of a sudden you find yourself at home, you find yourself in your driveway, parked in your garage or your parking spot, and you don't remember the last 4 or 5 blocks. You've hypnotized yourself. You put yourself in an altered state of consciousness into the alpha brainwave state. You know how to drive home. You know how to walk home because you've done it thousands of times, probably, if you've lived there several years, 365 days a year. You've done it probably 1,000 times. You lived there 3 or 4 years. You know how to drive home like you know how to tie your shoes, like you know how to zip up your jacket. And so with this work of therapeutic hypnosis, all we do is do that on purpose. The whole thing with, I don't have one here, let me get one out real quick. The whole thing that we see in the movies of the pocket watch, of swinging the pocket watch, and when they're all in tiny little packets. Hold on a second. So the whole thing with swinging the pocket watch is just to put you in that altered state of consciousness, and I'll do it with the pin. So like the whole thing of moving your eyes back and forth, just follow the pin. EDMR, right, with the eye desensitization, the whole thing is to stimulate the vagus nerve that's attached to the eyes, as well as moving the eyes back and forth. You're doing bilateral stimulation. There's no magic or mysticism to it. It's literally just biology. It's the way the brain works. And so here's my little thing. This is great for kids when you're working with kids, but just swing it back and forth, follow. And again, their eyes are moving back and forth. They're stimulating the vagus nerve, gives them something to focus on. It's boring after a while. And so I say, when you're just so bored and you want to rest and relax even more, just close your eyes when you want to, right? So there's no control over this. And the reason I know you're going to close your eyes is because you're at the session. Yeah. You've made this. You want to be there.
I'll just add for our listeners real quick, Craig, that you were swinging back and forth a pendulum because they can't actually see that in the episode.
Sorry, so I was swinging a pendulum.
I want to let them know you were swinging a green pendulum left to right and making me follow that with my eyes.
I should be more aware of that. I'm an audio person. I don't really watch video podcasts. I listen to the audio because I'm doing chores and things. So I'd be sorry, audio people. I forgot. But in terms of this work, and so that's a long explanation for this doesn't take away control. This gives you back your control because a lot of people that are seeking out, again, probably usually the bottom of the list of all the help they've sought for potentially years. And maybe they read an article, they read a blog, they heard a podcast episode. And so I hurt, I'm in pain, I'm tired of it, I want to be done with it. Maybe hypnotherapy is the way. They want to be there. And to a certain extent, they're already out of control because of the reaction their body has of anxiety or overwhelm or worry or hopelessness or anger or rage that they don't, maybe they know where it comes from, maybe they don't. But there's this aspect of subconscious mind, which is what we're accessing with hypnotherapy by moving you into that relaxed state, just like being bored back in school. We're altering your state of consciousness, which you do multiple times a day. So it's a natural process, not doing anything, again, mystical or magical about this. But we're moving you into that altered state of consciousness to access that subconscious mind. As you quiet down that conscious level of mind, moving out of the beta brainwave state into the alpha brainwave state, a very imaginative, daydreamy state of mind, you access the subconscious. Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Milton Erickson, they all talked about how the subconscious mind speaks to us in symbolism, in metaphor, imagination, storytelling. So we speak back to it in the same way. That's why stereotypical hypnosis is just imagine yourself at a staircase and you're walking down to the basement of relaxation. There's no basement of relaxation, but it's a symbol. It's a metaphor. And we tell a story to allow your subconscious mind to open up and create the healing. And the main job of the subconscious mind is for protection, is to keep you safe. Yes, it's running your digestive system, running your immune system, beating your heart. If you have a cut on your finger, it knows what to do. It knows which finger it's on. It doesn't, if you have a cut on the index finger of your left hand, it doesn't send all the white blood cells to the pinky finger of your right hand. You don't have to control it. You don't have to think about it. It just knows what to do. Same with somebody up here. We have snow here in Flagstaff, Arizona. And if somebody's up on the mountain skiing, they break their leg. The subconscious mind knows that the leg needs healing. Yeah, you're going to go to the doctor and get an x-ray and get a cast, but it knows to fuse the bone. It knows which bone to fuse. It's not fusing the bone in the pinky finger of your left hand. It's not fusing your arm or anything. It's doing the leg. It knows what the problem is. A scrape on your arm, it knows what the problem is. And so it's running all that behind the veil, behind the scenes in the unconscious part of mind. It's holding on to habits like tying our shoes, walking down the street, riding a bicycle, zipping up a jacket, all those things that we don't have to think about. But it's there to keep us safe and protected. And that's its main job. And so it has like this filing cabinet of files of different events, situations, circumstances we've been through in life, maybe a long time ago, maybe when we were a little kid, maybe since we were a newborn. And it holds on to these files because it doesn't want to experience it again. And so it's not against you. It may seem like that sometimes. I get it. And that's because the subconscious mind's job is not to make you happy and successful. It's to keep you safe and protected. And so it does this by holding on to this hurt and this pain as a form of armoring because it doesn't want to experience it again. So even if it happened, if you're 50 years old, if it happened 49 years ago, it's holding on to that. And you may not remember it because you're a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, but your subconscious mind does because it's holding on to that hurt pain. It hasn't let it go yet because it thinks it's helping you. And when some situation in your life currently, maybe as a 50-year-old, comes into your life, maybe at work or just on the streets or in family or something, it triggers that file because it reminds the mind of that incident that happened maybe so long ago. It'll turn on the warning signals. Now, when somebody pulls the fire alarm in a building, the sirens go off, the strobe lights go off, warning everybody that there's danger and you need to get to safety. We also have a warning system, but instead of sirens and lights, we have feeling states. So the feeling state of anxiety, the feeling state of anger, of overwhelm, of worry, of hopelessness, of overwhelm, of fear, that's a warning emotionally that there's danger in your life and you need to seek protection or get to safety or fight the attacker or something. And so the stress response will turn on. Now, this is a very difficult and not efficient way of running the body, turning on the stress response. The mind has to start creating the hormones of adrenaline and cortisol, dumping it into your bloodstream. Your heart starts racing. So to get the big muscle of your arms to fight, big muscle of your legs to escape, it needs oxygen, quick oxygen. So you start shallow breathing, or maybe even holding your breath. If you're in great fear, it starts shutting down the power of your immune system, your digestive system, because it wants that power to the big muscle of your arms and legs in that instance. There's no need to fight the common cold. That's tomorrow's problem. There's no need to fight cancer. That's next week's problem. No need to digest that sandwich so you have energy in 7 hours. You're in trouble right now. So that energy will be pulled away. That's not an efficient way, an easy way of running the body, but it'll do it because it thinks you're in danger. And the only way you're changing the brain chemistry in that way is through a thought, conscious or unconscious. The issue with being a human being is that the mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And that becomes a big issue because you may be reacting to a situation that really isn't there. And this is most noticeable when somebody's having a nightmare in the middle of the night. And it could be something super realistic, like a war veteran having a PTSD nightmare about being in combat on the front lines, even though the war was 30 years ago. Or it could be something super ridiculous, like a gigantic cheeseburger is chasing you down the street, throwing coconuts at your head. Is dumb. It's not going to happen ever. But your mind in that instant thinks you're under attack, and it has this shoot first, ask questions later safety protocol. So it'll turn on the stress response, even in deep sleep. So much so that's making so much cortisol in your brain, it overrides the melatonin, and you wake up with a scream, maybe looking for the danger of the cheeseburger chasing you down the street. That's happening in deep sleep. So you imagine what's happening in your waking world. And so that's the main job of the subconscious mind. Yes, running your immune system and beating your heart and healing scrapes and scratches and cuts on fingers and things, holding on to the habits like tying your shoes and walking down the street. But the main job is keep you safe and protected. And it'll do that by emotionalizing these past files, again, whether it happened last week or 50 years ago or longer. It'll emotionalize it, and anything looks like that, it'll send out the warning signals. The conscious mind, the logical mind, the analytical mind, the mind that sets up your goals, the plans to achieve those goals, the willpower to go after those goals, that's the conscious mind. But what neuroscience tells us is the conscious mind only makes up 5% of mind. Subconscious mind makes up 95% of mind. So when there's conflict between the logical mind and the emotional mind wins every time. That's why this doesn't have to make any sense. And that's why, again, not to disparage talk therapy. I think talk therapy is very important. I think everybody should be doing it at least every few years in their life, just to get a kind of read and some coaching and about how life is going. But you're using that 5% conscious mind to analyze and logically look at life and maybe the problems in life. But if you're not aware of what the files are in that filing cabinet, you just end up like maybe spinning your wheels sometimes. And people come to hypnotherapy, they come to sessions with me and say, yeah, I've been doing talk therapy for 3 years and I still feel awful. It's because logically they couldn't determine what was in that unconscious part of mind, that behind the veil. Hypnotherapy can allow that because you're quieting down that conscious level of mind and accessing that filing cabinet. You are, not me. I don't fix anybody, and hypnotherapy in and of itself doesn't fix anybody. You fix yourself. You gain back the control. And not to say that it was anybody's fault or that should have happened or to blame the victim or that it was fair, but you're the one who put those files in there, even as a child. Yeah, unconsciously, probably through a traumatic event or distress of some way, humiliation, embarrassment, anger, fear. And it shouldn't have happened. And you didn't do it on purpose. And you probably weren't even aware you're doing it. But you're the one who put those files in there, the beliefs and the mindset around those events and situations, circumstances. So that becomes very empowering because that means you can take them out. You can replace them. You can edit them. You can amend them. Whatever it is you need to do to heal that. You know what you need to do to heal it. Just like your body, mind, spirit knows what to do about the cut on the finger, the scrape on the knee, the broken leg, or whatever somebody's dealing with. Knows what to do about it. In and of itself, we fight cancer all the time, all of us. It's just that sometimes it gets overwhelmed. The immune system gets overwhelmed. That's the point of the immune system, of the killer T cells, is to fight cancer. And you watch YouTube videos of them going after cancer cells. It's pretty extraordinary. So It knows what to do. It knows what the problem is. It's just it thinks it's helping you by holding on to it as a form of protection. But the issue, again, about being human is what you practice, you get better at. And so we know this by if you're learning piano or guitar or dance, martial arts, learning to walk as a child. What you practice, you get better at. So what if you're practicing anxiety as related to a certain event? Like speaking in public is one for a lot of people. If you're practicing feeling anxious and nervous to the point of almost throwing up every time you need to give a presentation because that's part of your job, are you not practicing wiring your brain for that feeling state and that physical reaction to this particular event? You did that. You weren't born being afraid of public speaking. You learned that. You trained yourself to do that. And again, I'm not blaming you or saying it's your fault. It's just that this is what has been practiced. Nobody told you differently. So you can practice something else and you can release and let go of that stuff. So that in about 30 minutes is a bit of around the consciousness of the human being and the brain and biology of it. This is an extraordinary healing technique. And unfortunately, there is a lot of misconceptions, a lot of myths around it, especially with like the shows, maybe seen them on YouTube or comedy clubs or here in America in Las Vegas. And it's that thing where the hypnotist comes out and a bunch of people come up on stage and then they start dancing like Michael Jackson or, I don't know, singing like Tom Jones or Elvis Presley or something. And they bark like dogs and quack like ducks and pretend they're on a roller coaster. It's all about the intention. Every single person who got up on the stage volunteered to be up there. And assuming it's real, and I've seen shows at hypnotherapy conferences where everybody up on stage is a hypnotherapist. And the people chosen out of the audience were all hypnotherapists. So there's a certain aspect of it that's real, assuming it's not the improv troupe on stage and it's all set up beforehand. Let's say it's totally real. Everybody that gets up on the stage wants to be up there. So they want to be hypnotized. And who's that hypnotist going to pick out of the audience? Is they picking the introvert in the back of the room in the shadows, sinking down in their chair, trying to hide? Or are they picking the extrovert who got there early, sat in the front row and is jumping up and down saying, pick me, because they want to be part of the show. They want to be part of the fun. And look at them after the show. They all have a big smile on their face. They had a great time because that was the point. And you even watch those shows at the very beginning. They'll do a process. Maybe there's 15 people on stage. They'll do a process to get them into a deep trance state because there's bright lights. There's 100 people, 500 people in the audience. And they'll do a process to get them into a more relaxed state. And if they can't do it, they're excused from the stage. Why can't they do it? Because they're nervous. They're now have stage fright, maybe. Just like public speaking phobia. And they're around a bunch of front people. Now they're going to act silly. And they didn't think it through, or maybe their friends made them give it up there, or they lost a bet or something. And they're just so tense about it that it's not going to be a good show. They can't do it because now they're firing at that 30 cycles per second instead of 12. Everybody else wants to be part of the show. And so they drop down into that. And the hypnotist is looking for little cues like relaxing the facial muscles, maybe their eyes as they're closed, darting around or something else. They know the little clues. They're professionals or entertainers. They know what person is going to make for a good show. And if you're too nervous, you look uncomfortable, you're acting uncomfortable, you say, hey, how about you go back in the audience and enjoy the show from your seat? And they'll run off the stage because they don't want to be there. So again, it's that myth of control. You can't make anybody do anything they don't want to do. So when you see that stuff, the silliness on stage, they want to do it. They're extroverts, they're exhibitionists. They want to be part of the show, the star of the show, and they just want to have fun and have a funny video to put on Instagram or TikTok or something. And so with this intention that you have, you can pretty much become the person you want to become because it's your subconscious mind. And you've been training yourself over years, if not decades, to be the person you are. And that, again, not to say it's your fault. And sometimes we grow up in homes that are unsafe, or we get told awful things that lower our self-esteem and our feelings of self-worth. And again, that's not an ideal way of growing up. Or if you experience something later in life of a relationship that maybe didn't go well and was very hurtful and a lot of pain, again, your subconscious mind is there to help protect you. It's just only using the information that it's being given. And so it's like computer code. And if somebody puts in computer code, they're writing their accounting program for their business, and they put in their 2 + 2 = 5, they're just going to get 2 + 2 = 5 back out. It's that coder saying garbage in, garbage out. It's like you can't determine that 2 plus 2 equals 4 because you told it 2 plus 2 equals 5. And it just assumes that's what you want it to be. And nothing's going to change. It doesn't matter how much you type in your keyboard or slam the keyboard with your fist out of frustration or talk about it to your friends and vent about how unfair it is that 2 plus 2 equals 5, or take a Sharpie, take a marker and write on your computer screen 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's not until you go into that computer code and eliminate or cancel or edit or amend that line of computer code and put in 2 plus 2 equals 4. Now all your equations equal out. And I don't mean to say it's that easy, but sometimes it's that easy. I generally see people 3 or 4 times because they want the healing to happen. They know what the problem is. I don't have to analyze or diagnose anybody. I don't prescribe for anybody. I don't know what the problem is. You do, though. To create that brain chemistry of fear or anxiety or overwhelm or hopelessness, that feeling state you have in the body, there's a place in your body where you feel that hopelessness or that frustration or that disappointment. To feel that in your body can only happen through brain chemistry, changing hormones and neuropeptides. The only way you're changing it in that way, because it's turning on the stress response in an inefficient way of running the body, it's very hard work. The only reason you're doing that is because of a thought, conscious or unconscious. You know why you're doing it. Maybe unconsciously, but you know why you're doing it. Sometimes it's just as easy to follow a feeling state back to the unconscious thought that's creating it, or the issue, that file in the filing cabinet. And again, not to blame you or say it was your phone, but you're the one who put that file in there. So that means you can take it out. You don't have to ask permission. You don't have to get somebody else's advice about, you want that file out or amended or edited or something. You're allowed to do that. And that's happened in my own life. The reason I got into this work, and real quick, something about my life, and the reason I got into this work, because it fit both aspects of my life. In my teenage years, I started dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety. This is the 1980s. There's no internet. We certainly weren't talking about depression back in the 1980s or 70s or before that. It wasn't until the SSRI drugs, Prozac and things like that, started coming out in the late 90s that the conversation around depression and let alone anxiety came out into the open. And the daytime talk show, Oprah and the people like that were talking about 60 Minutes news programs you could talk about with your doctor and not be embarrassed. And of course, the internet's coming out in the late 90s with our 14.4 modems and 12 hours to download a picture. But we had the internet. We could have discussions and forums and things. And in the 80s, there's nothing to really do about it other than maybe whatever book you might find or talk therapist you had to look up in the yellow pages. And so as a teenager, I just struggled with it. And as I tried to do I was doing a lot of personal growth work, reading Tony Robbins and whatever it was in the 90s. A lot of people started talking about hypnotherapy as a way to change your life, as a way to gain back control and heal subconscious mind. And so I found somebody and started working with it. And another aspect of my life that's very important to me is the spiritual aspect of being human. And I grew up in the Episcopal Church. If you're unfamiliar with the Episcopal Church, that's basically Catholicism light, Protestant church. And I think it's just because it was the church up the street from our house. If it was Methodist or Lutheran or Calvinist or something, that's what we have been. But grew up in an Episcopal church from a baby up until my 20s. I went to a Baptist-run high school. So all I knew was religion. And there were aspects of that helped me reach happiness and joy, even bliss, that mountaintop experience. And so I focused my attention on spirituality to help relieve anxiety and depression as opposed to drinking or drugs or anything like that. This is what I knew. And as I learned more about hypnotherapy, this was a way to also access deeper levels of spirituality. And so it kind of fit both aspects that were important in my life, one relieving depression and anxiety, and the other building a deeper level of spirituality in my life. And back in the day, you couldn't just do ayahuasca ceremonies and things like that. That was the 1980s, 1990s. You couldn't do that. That's pretty much recent within the last 10 years or so. And so the only real easy way of doing it without having to go underground or through the back doors or finding somebody that you hope they're legit was doing these altered state of consciousness and accessing higher self through that. And so I ended up pivoting later in life and training as a hypnotherapist. Went to the Hypnotherapy Academy of America. It's here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Been around about 40 years. People from around the world come to this school. When I was going there some years ago, people not only from around America, but from South America and Europe. There's some people trying to get in from Iran and Russia, and they're just having visa problems. So it's an extraordinary school, and it's 500 hours. Not to brag too much about it, but just to give you an idea of the training and to be aware of who you're working with this kind of altered state of consciousness and healing is, at least here in America, to ride in an ambulance, to be an emergency EMT, emergency medical technician, and restart hearts and keep people alive and not heal, but deal with broken limbs and internal bleeding and things like this. That's 150 hours to do that. I have 500 hours of just clinical hypnotherapy and past life regression training just from this one school. 2.5 months, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. Very intensive training. And so what's fascinating about this work of the training I got is like you learn how to help people with trauma, releasing and letting go trauma and hurt and pain, maybe even from early childhood or maybe from last month. Medical hypnosis, pain control, healing acceleration. That was 400 hours right there. So the foundation is learning about trauma reversal and healing, dealing with fear and anger and resentment and things like that, let alone the more like physical pain management, pain control, healing acceleration, things like that, immune system boosting. Then you learn the more spiritual aspects. And so my training is trauma reversal. So now you match that with the spiritual work. And if there's some sort of connection, just you're having some issues of childhood, you're in your 60s, 70s. I've worked with people in their 70s who are dealing with stuff from childhood for some 70 years. The hurt, the pain, the anxiety, the anger, the resentment has been there because this thing that happened maybe when they're 4 or 5 years old is still affecting their lives. Going a bit deeper, going a bit further back, what about a past life? That's a real thing. We'll get into that in some of the later episodes, more in depth than that. The spiritual aspect of this, of going deeper, it's just a memory, just like that 70-year-old has a memory, maybe an unconscious memory of something that happened, abuse or some trauma that happened when they're 4 or 5. If there's an unconscious connection to a past life, that's affecting you in some sort of way. Having that background in releasing trauma and hurt and pain is a great skill to have. And not a lot of people have it. But if that's an aspect of the healing work you need to do, it can be quite extraordinary. And that kind of fit all levels of my life. And here I am talking to you about it. I'm going to take a breath now, take a sip of tea. And if you have any questions in the 2 minutes we have left.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing all of this. It's absolutely fascinating to me. And of course, I'm always fascinated also by the subconscious mind, because certainly a lot of my own healing journey evolved around working with the subconscious mind. So I experienced the power of that and how it can empower our own healing journeys, which I was grateful for as I peeled back these layers of the onion. And I do feel that there are a lot of myths around hypnotherapy surrounding, as you said, what does it do? What is it? And what will it do to me? All of these things that you touched on. I find it's really important that we actually discuss a lot of that and give some information to our listeners so they can make informed choices, because this is such a fantastic healing modality to not cut that out yet, but maybe give it a try and experience it for yourself before you make a decision on that. And certainly the power it has, as you said, taking back control, where I feel another myth is often that people think when we're in the conscious mind, we have control. Whereas I believe the real control is more in the subconscious mind, because as you said, that's where we can affect so many deep-seated things that we're storing in all of these filing cabinets. We can't reach them any other way. So yeah, thank you for shedding some light on all of that and diving into a few of the things. Another question that I get about hypnosis all the time is whether it's the same as meditation. And I don't know if we touched on this in our podcast episode, but...
Yeah, I can't remember either. But yeah, real quickly, and I swear I'll do this really quickly. I know that was a 45-minute answer to your first question, but I swear I'll do this in just a couple minutes. It's a great question. I can answer it in two parts. One is the feeling state is very similar because, and again, I don't want to get into the whole thing of going into the upper levels of gamma. The researchers, maybe 20 years ago at this point, National Geographic had this great photo. I wish it's in a box somewhere off to my side, but this great photo of a Tibetan monk with all the electrodes all over his head because they were looking at brainwave state for meditators who have been meditating 30 years, 7 hours a day. What is their brain doing? They thought, oh, we're going to go into deep levels of theta. They went the opposite direction. They went up and started firing even faster, like 100 cycles per second, which they call the gamma state. So that's a whole conversation, different conversation there. But in terms of meditation, yes, you're relaxing the mind and body, but the point of meditation, I'm speaking of things like Zen meditation or transcendental meditation, is that you're bringing your attention back to this conscious awareness of the present moment, back to the now, to this breath again and again, because your mind wanders off all the time. And that's even long-term meditators. You ask, hey, how's meditation today? Oh, I couldn't keep my mind from wandering. It was I'm frustrated. And because it's so difficult. That's why this whole thing, oh, I can't be hypnotized. I think it's just a comfort level with the person you're with or just with the myths about it. But in terms of, is it meditation? In terms of the feeling state of just being relaxed and calm and comfortable, yes, it's like meditation. But in terms of what your mind is doing, it's the exact opposite. We don't want your mind in the present current moment. We want it to flutter away and float away. And we want to access the more symbolic, metaphoric, imaginative aspects of mind. And it's also the aspect you were just talking about. We think the conscious mind is in charge because that's what brings us our awareness. But we're being inundated with 11 million bits of information per second. So through our five senses, what we see, hear, taste, touch, smell. So the temperature of the room, something you don't notice unless it's too hot or too cold. The lights in the room, unless it's too bright or too dark. Smells in the room, unless somebody's burning something in the kitchen or somebody's wearing too much perfume or something. The sounds, which maybe if you just take a moment to listen, and you might hear the hum of the refrigerator or the ceiling fan, and you don't notice these things unless there's a knock in the motor of the refrigerator. It was, oh no, now there's something wrong with the refrigerator, or the squeak in the ceiling fan. You filter all this stuff out because it's unimportant to you, unless it's, again, too hot or too cold or too bright or too dark. And we're only cognizant of 200 bits of that 11 million. And it's the subconscious mind that's filtering out all that other stuff, determined by what you're placing into that filing cabinet and the news you're listening to and the people you surround yourself with, the family you engage with. It is programming that subconscious mind of yours to filter out parts of life. So you only get that 200 bits of information. It's like when you're thinking about buying a new car and all of a sudden you see that car everywhere. You say, oh, I should get a Land Rover. And all of a sudden there's Land Rovers everywhere. Everybody has a Land Rover. What's the deal with that? And then you think, oh, okay, I should, like, I don't know if you all have Toyotas or things like that. Oh, I should get a Toyota Prius or something. And now you see Toyota Priuses everywhere. It's like you're focusing your attention on something else. Is that aspect of life when your day goes from bad to worse? If you ever had that experience, maybe at work or just family or something in life, your day goes from bad to worse. So at the end of the day, you're just so frustrated and angry. You want to punch a hole in the wall. There's lots of wonderful things going on. You're just not aware of them because that's getting filtered out because you programmed yourself. Oh, you just want to see the bad stuff in life? I can do that. It's computer code. Garbage in, garbage out. I want to see bad stuff in life because life sucks and this day is awful. It's okay. Well, I'll show you more awful stuff then. And ignoring all the wonderful things. There's a lot of wonderful things happening here in America. It seems to be on fire. It's just whatever's going on in this country. I don't know what's happening. But there's still a lot of stuff, wonderful things, people helping other people, a lot of compassion and empathy, no matter what on the news. It's just, you're not programming yourself for that. And it's really what you just said. And you hit it is, you think your conscious mind's in charge, but it really isn't. Even as, I can become aware of whatever I want. That's really how you've programmed yourself over maybe decades. That shows you that 200 bits out of that 11 million. And so this is a great set of tools and techniques under the umbrella of hypnotherapy that can help you change that.
Yeah, absolutely. And very versatile. I think one of the myths is that it can only help you relax. But of course, hypnotherapy is so much more than that and far beyond, and everything that you explained today too, for many, many different applications.
And this is a conversation, man, we could go on for hours and hours, but just really quickly to say that we could do this in a crowded airport on the fluorescent lights at the crowded gate because somebody's having a panic attack. We don't have to find a recliner and turn down the lights. It may be nice, certainly helps the body relax more, which will help the brain relax, which will help the mind relax. But we can do this in emergency situations. And then during the first Gulf, I believe the first Gulf War America was in back in the early 90s, there were some triage helicopters coming from the front lines with American soldiers that had been injured and shot up and blown up and things. And there was one helicopter, one nurse who had a higher success rate of keeping them alive than the other helicopters. And of course, they look at this. They want to know what she's doing that's different than everything else. And then teach the others how to do it, how to keep the American soldiers alive to get to the hospital away from the front lines. And what she was doing is talking to the patients, the critically injured soldiers, even if they were unconscious. She was talking and saying, "You're safe now. I am with you. I'm here to help and keep you safe. You're going to the hospital. You can stop bleeding now. You can stop racing your heart. You can stop the adrenaline coursing through your system. You can stop that now because I'm here and you are safe." And they would do it. Their bodies would react and they would stop bleeding. So they wouldn't bleed out. They would stop hemorrhaging. They'd stop producing the cortisol and the adrenaline and all that, even again, if they were unconscious. And she said, "Yeah, I'm doing hypnosis." And they told her to stop it because of all the myths of hypnosis. And so now they call it verbal first aid. You go to your, well, probably a bookstore maybe, but because it's pretty niche, but go like on Amazon or something, look up verbal first aid. There's all these books about it. It's hypnosis. But there's so much baggage to that word that the military, even with positive results, extraordinary results, said absolutely do not do that. And so they had to change the name in order to get it through. And so it's extraordinary what this work will do. And again, it's just, I don't know of a worse situation than being in a helicopter flying at whatever 100 miles an hour with people yelling and shouting and bombs going off and stuff. And yet that still worked. It's really the subconscious. And again, it's not so much the hypnotherapy or the hypnosis or the hypnotherapist. It's you. You are going to keep yourself safe. You're going to do what's best for you. And up until now, maybe it was holding on to that hurt and pain. And now you're getting that intuition, that tap in the sword, the exhaustion of holding on to that hurt and pain. It's been heavy and it's time to release it. And hypnotherapy can be a great way of doing it.
Yeah. Wow. What a story. And I didn't even know that. Verbal first aid. Okay, we're going to have to check into that. I learn something new every time.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I just want to thank you for doing this series with me, because I really feel that we can bring some just profound information to our listeners through this and maybe change their own healing experiences just a little bit by opening up other avenues that they might be able to explore, hypnosis being one of those. And I know we will get into past life regression later on as well, which I'm excited about. But for today, thank you for joining me.
Oh, that's right. Thank you so much. I appreciate you letting me go on and on. I told you before you hit record, I'm going to go off on so many tangents. So stop me if you have a question, but I appreciate you letting me go on and on. And yeah, we got some deeper episodes coming up, and it's all going to filter into that more spiritual side of this, as we touched on a tiny little bit. And by I think the fourth episode, we're really going to go in deep into past life regression and all that. It'll be fun.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I loved listening to you, and I almost felt like I was being hypnotized a little bit just by listening to you. So we'll see what our listeners say to that.
Boring voice of listen to me talk about hypnosis for 45 minutes.
Sounded so soothing, and I was just listening in. Yeah, but I think great information on the biology and sort of the background of hypnosis, which isn't very often discussed. I think maybe on YouTube I find a lot of videos on the how-to and things like that, but not so much really on the background of hypnosis and what it does and how it works.
Maybe next time we touch a little bit about this, but Sigmund Freud was a hypnotherapist.
Yeah.
And he just wasn't very good at it because he had a speech impediment. So he decided to go a different direction and created analytical psychology.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Weird ties into all the stuff. So that's a whole different story. But
yeah, amazing.
Copious amounts of cocaine he was doing when he was creating analytical psychology. But again, that's for another time.
We'll make another episode out of that one and start diving into that. Amazing. Thank you, Craig, for joining me today. And we are wrapping up part 1 of the Hypnotica series. And we discussed some of the myths of hypnotherapy today. And our next part 2, we'll be diving into the healing power of hypnotherapy. So be sure to tune back in for part 2. And for now, thanks for joining us, everyone. Thanks for listening in. Thank you, Craig, for sharing this information with us. And take care, everyone, and be well. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Journey on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejourney.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.